All right, welcome to Mike's Motorworks, and today we got an interesting segment. We're with Little John from Little John's Car Quest, and we're in the process of stuffing a 5.3 V8 inside of his Blazer. And we have a unique swap that we're trying to undertake here. Instead of using the traditional 5.3 truck intake, we're going with a different intake. John, tell them what's going on.
All right, what we got is the LS3 intake. Going on to a basically a LS1, LS2, 5.3.
LS3 intake, so that's Corvette?
Corvette and cts-v.
Wow, alrighty. And the reason we're doing that is so that you can get more...
It's more of a horsepower. Your truck style has more of a torque rating than the smaller, lower profile LS3.
All right, so a little bit more airflow then, and the slower runners so that you can compensate by having higher horsepower. Right,
yeah.
Fair enough. So how in the world do you get this? Because they're not quite the same motors, at least on the top end. Is that correct?
Right. The heads are a little bit different. One, they're the 5.3, 4.8 heads. But they call them the castle style heads that are on the 5.3 or colonial. They call them a bunch of different things. Where the LS3 Corvette and cts-v has a square port.
Okay.
So basically, what we got to do is convert it. And ICT makes a conversion kit that goes from your style, your colonial or castle, whatever you like to call it, to the square port to accept for the LS3 intake. So you got to have this adapter to go on to the LS3 intake.
All right, and if you're looking at this really closely, I'm going to zoom in real quick and bring this in closer. You can actually see here where the cut is. Here you can see where the cut my finger goes through, right? That's changing it to the square on the inside. And then up here you got this little point right there. That's why they call it, you said castle or?
Castle or colonial or whatever they want to. There's a bunch of different names for it.
But that's usually the standard on the 5.3, 4, whatever. All right, cool deal. So, you got to get the adapter. Is there anything else that's required for this?
Yes and no. They do supply bolts, but for this application they don't work. So we actually end up doing some M6 by 1.0 stainless all-thread. And we cut it down to make that work because we needed the extra length.
Okay, so you got to get the extra bolts, the extra length to keep the intake in place.
Yeah.
All right, so is there anything else we know before we start putting this thing on there?
Yes, the standard MAP sensor will not work.
Okay.
You got to go through the LS3 MAP sensor, and that relocates it from the back to the front for that port.
Okay, and then you also have on this one the Corvettes and the cts-vs had fly-by-wire, and this is fly-by
cable.
Cable. Okay,
So this is cable drive. So we upgraded to a 92 millimeter throttle body, which is cable drive.
Awesome deal. All right, let's get this thing in there.
All right, so what we got here is the fuel injectors out of a standard 5.3. This is a flex fuel 5.3. There will be a major difference going on for this intake. That is the new fuel injector for the LS3 6-liter, 6.2, as well as some of the Corvettes. 7-liter, I believe it is. But you can see the big difference, and the reason why this won't work is because it needs that little cap in there to sit correctly in the LS3 intake.
sometimes on those other shows that they do on the big broadcasts and other YouTube channels, they like to stage things. So they'll often put things on, take it off. Or they'll take something off, put it back on again just so they can film how it goes off. That's not what we do here. And sometimes things don't always work quickly. So let's check back in and see how things are going. I didn't know if you were catching on what they were doing, but in my hands, I'm holding exactly, well, sort of what they got going on inside the engine bay. Holding that intake down into the heads itself are about 10 of these longer shafts here. And what they're doing is they're taking two nuts, right, and they're sandwiching them together, tightening them up, so that when you tighten and torque down the top one, the whole shaft spins, all right? If you didn't, when you just torque down the one, and spun the one, okay, it would just simply free spin. There's no way to keep it from going. So this one acts kind of like a lock itself. All right, so they'll drive those down in there, or into the block itself, and then they have those little caps that came with the intake kit, and those little beauty caps to hold those in place. And of course, everything here, you know, down holds that intake in its spot. There you go.
So we just tightened it down on top of it, used needle nose pliers to get in there, and you just need it ever so slightly on there, and that allows the whole thing to turn and forces that down a little bit deeper.
Cool. And then you already had the thingies on there, the beauty washers, right?
Yep.
And you got that one just above you to finish up, is that correct?
Yeah, I just gotta tighten them down.
All right. Now we're seating. Notice the sequence here. Working from the middle to the outside, crisscross pattern. Any torque spec?
Yeah. But I'm gonna use a calibrated wrench because I left my torque wrench at home. These kind of have their own indicators.
Right. Like when it stops?
No, you can zoom into this.
Okay, I'm already zooming as far as I can.
Okay.
Oh, they crush.
Yeah, they're actually crushed. They got little fabric on the backside, and they actually crush down to allow a good seat.
Nice. So when they start crushing, you're tight.
Yep.
Neato. Basically what he did was, if you notice here, the little crush washers, all right? When you get the intake from the factory, they'll all be kind of rounded. And then as you start torquing down in proper sequence, right, they all start to crush out. And that tells you you have the proper seat. All right, if you're doing it way too much, they'll let you know. All right? All right. And that brings us to the end of this intake installation.
All right, so I dropped a nut down into the side. Now, these where the upper head bolts are, it does allow passage through. So what we did was took the air hose and forced a little bit of compressed air, and it forced it through the opening and then shot air through the front and caused it to shoot out the back.
Cool. I was actually showing how you did the bolt thingies.
Oh. You should have said something. Yeah.
Oh, this will be a good story for the end.
Alright, so what we did was used a good pair of needle nose pliers. I just did
Drop your nut. Quit dropping your nuts.